literally is going live now. So people should get an announcement that we're now live. Okay, so now everything we now say actually is now just going straight out. There is a 60-second delay. So if we say something, I could probably pull the stream before if we say something really, really bad. But I'm sure we won't. It's fine. But I've got on my screen, I've got the any live chats that come through and stuff. So if there's commentaries and stuff like people message, we can talk about it. But of course, we're still waiting for Kirk. So we can't really start talking about Metal to the Masses until he gets here. Otherwise, we'll just have to do it all again. And I'm sure he's got plenty to say on Metal to the Masses.
Yep.
We've had a yo from the Before the Sirens boys. Hello, Before the Sirens.
Yo. I've, as best of my knowledge, got a note of all the heat qualifiers so far.
Yeah, so I've got that as well. So we can what we'll do is we'll just run through them. Oh, Kirk's joining now, finally. James, hi, James. James has said hi from Millstone.
Hi, James. Thanks for joining.
We have got about a 60-second delay, so you just have to bear with us if we don't respond. Kirk's now joined the live stream. Hi, Kirk.
Evening.
Hi, Kirk.
So Kirk's now with us. We are live. We are live on YouTube. Yeah.
Ready for some content.
Kirk's doing his hair. What's this all about? Like, do my hair.
I just got back from work.
Right, so great, we've got you on it. So we've got about a 60-second delay, as I just said. We've got at 7:30, we've got Dave from Lowdown, and of course Alan from Before the Sirens joining us. We've got some interesting topics to talk about from then onwards. But of course, because these guys are in bands that are in Metal to the Masses, we didn't want to have them involved in this part of the discussion. As it wasn't really fair. I did initially ask if any of the guys from the Club 85 wanted to be involved in this, and what they've said is it wouldn't be fair for them to come in and get involved in like discussions about bands and finals and stuff like that because of impartiality, whereas obviously we're no longer judges in any more of the quarterfinals and semi-finals, so we can now have our viewpoints. And I would say any viewpoints that we do have in relation to Metal to the Masses bands is purely our own viewpoints. We have no sway on what happens, so it is just what we personally believe. So yeah, we can't say anything about Heat 8 because obviously Heat 8 hasn't started. But we have 4 bands coming this Sunday, which are We Are Broken Tooth, Rive, For the Hornets, and Sulukara. 4 bands. I've only heard one of the names for the Hornets, and I have no idea about any of the bands. So you guys, do you know much about any of these?
I do, yeah. You say We Are Broken Tooth. I think that's just their sort of Facebook handle, their social media handle. I think the band is Broken Tooth, unless they've sort of rebranded while they've been away, because they did have a little bit of a break, I think. They've, I'm not sure they've competed in the competition before. They've certainly played at Club 85. I've seen them a couple of times. Really good, powerful metallic hardcore. I'm looking forward to seeing them. Got an album out on the streaming services and a couple of EPs. Yeah, good band. For the Hornets, obviously a big fan of them. Sort of not quite sure how to describe them. Sort of pop. They've got punk elements. You know.
Did you nearly say pop punk band?
I did.
Pop punk.
It's not.
It's definitely going to make me hate that band.
No, it's not. Yeah, different sort of elements, more sort of rock and punk than metal, but there's metal elements as well. They'll be an interesting one to see. The other 2 bands, Rive, look like they could be my sort of group though, with the logo. You know, who knows what they're like. And who was the other one?
Sulukara.
Again, don't know them either. But yeah, should be a good final heat. And is Earthbound headlining?
Earthbound, yeah.
Yeah, good to see them again as well. Yeah.
I mean, Kirk, have you heard of Rive or Sulukara?
No, the only band I've heard of is For the Hornets, just the name. But Andy, you're not selling them to me. Unless it is punk rock and metal. If there's any pop and punk in there, I'm going to fucking detest that music. Sorry for swearing.
You know what? We're pleasantly surprised. I mean, that they will be, what's the word? Bit of a curveball for the bands that compete in this competition, but we'll see how they get on.
So let's have a look at the finalists that we now have. So quarter finalists. So we've got Concrete Gods, Veil of Fog, Buried on Sunday, Swarms UK, Extreme Death Art, As Vengeance Falls, Is Stranger, Before the Sirens, Scarlet Envy, Millstone, Hereward, Lowdown, Burdensome, and Sentient. I mean, that's a pretty strong quarterfinal mix of bands in there, and there isn't like all real heavy bands or all real rock bands. In fact, there's more rock style or the lighter metal bands in this quarterfinal than was last year. Last year, it was a lot of the big heavyweight, real low down, not low down, but low. They weren't there.
They weren't in it.
But you know what I mean? It was all the heavy ones. And before we talk about, we're not going to go band by band because that will take us forever to go to talk about each and every band. But I was going to get from you guys, what has been your one shock or surprise so far out of all the heats? What's the one thing that's made you go bloody hell? Or whether that was a band's performance, whether that was a result, what's been the one thing that stood out for you that's been a kind of a shock factor this year so far? Andy?
I mean, there's been some really tough heats, and there's been a couple where it's been a real shame that two bands have not progressed, and it's been like a fight between three that I really like and would like to have gone through. That happens sort of year in, year out. There's always a couple of heats where it's a really tough one, and you want any two of the four could go through, and you're disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, as a sort of a bit of a shock factor, I was really, really impressed at how good Extreme Death Art were. I think it was their debut show. We're still sort of debating whether it was that was their material, or whether they were more instrumentally inclined, or whether they were just missing a vocalist. We since found out that they are composing songs that have the lyrics and the vocals, but there's nobody taking that role yet. But yeah, I mean, I'm pleased about the ones that have gone through. I'm disappointed in some that haven't. Own Your Life are a prime example. I'd love for them to have gone through. I missed their performance, but I'm really surprised the Killer didn't go through. I mean, perhaps you can say later on how Vel or Fog and Off Concrete Gods performed. I don't know either of those two bands. They progressed from 8-7. But yeah, it's been brilliant so far.
What about yourself, Kirk?
The shock for me was a Killer not going through. Probably the best band in the tournament for me, or competition. I know we don't even like using that word, but they were really top notch. Probably the best extreme metal vocalist that I've come across so far as well. I thought they had a real good crunch to the music, good live mix. Of Concrete Gods and Vela Fog were excellent, so I don't begrudge them going through. I thought they were really at the top of the game as well. I just think a Killer, they're already good enough to play Bloodstock, in my opinion. They've got the stagecraft. When we say stagecraft, they're not doing anything extravagant. They're playing extreme metal. They're playing an epic melodic death metal music with some really mid-tempo chugging movements in there and sweet picking. So there's a lot of technicality in there. What's disappointing me this year, the heavy bands are not going through. Own Your Life, they're, as you said, Andy, prime example. Go out and listen to their new EP, This Hate. It's one of, I think, 5 records that I've awarded a 9 out of 10 so far this year. And I think I've reviewed 95 records so far. They were just so aggressive, but the riffs were so well crafted. I kept saying they were like a hardcore band playing bolt thrower riffs. They even had pinch harmonics in there. The drummer, real good influence coming through from Fear Factory and bands like that. The bass player listens to jazz, so he's playing some really off-kilter stuff as well. Good to see my friends in Scarlet Envy get through. I think they just get better with every gig that I see. In terms of any more shocks, Dave, because that's what your question was, should I be shocked? We just don't seem, there never seems to be any black metal or grindcore bands in this area. There's an overabundant, I think there's an abundance of metalcore bands. Most of them are good, though, to be fair.
Right.
And it's only when going back and listening, for example, the progressive metalcore band Far From Refuge. Again, go and listen to their singles. I thought they were very strong on the night. They were just in probably the toughest heat. What a band. Same with Buried on Sunday. They are really talented. They're such a productive band, those boys. They've done an album of 54 minutes, 13 tracks. They've already got a new EP coming out, and they've got the second album written. And we're talking about really well-crafted songs as well, you know, with some technical moments. So, Dave, let us put it back onto you, though. What has shocked you?
It's not been any one particular band. For me, it's the shock has been the lack of awareness from bands about what they needed to do to get to the next stage. So we knew it was announced where it was 50% judge, 50% audience vote. And we've talked about some of these heavy bands, but from my recollection on those nights, they weren't the people that brought crowds. And the heats are all about your crowd, because it's only now when we get to the quarterfinals where the judges' percentage goes up. Whereas at the early stages, it's all about your audience. And we've talked offline about A Killer. And I said, obviously, my big thing was A Killer started at 7, just after doors opening. Of Concrete Gods, I think last actually had more people went to see of Concrete Gods, but they came halfway through the evening. So if you're a ballot sheet and you're going, right, well, I voted for my band of Concrete Gods, who else have I got? Well, I've only seen one other band, which was Vel or Fog or one of the others, and you're like, well, I'll tick them. They never saw A Killer, so you're not going to vote for a band that you've never seen. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the bands, we said it, but when we talked about this at the beginning, before this all kicked off, we said that any band could get to the final if they brought people. And really, this is what gigging's about, is to play to crowds, to play to people. So I find it quite interesting that bands haven't. We've talked about offline about Millstone Scarlet Envy set. And again, Millstone brought a lot of people in their heat. And if you're a big fan of Millstone, if you looked at the other bands on the bill, which was Own Your Life and was it Far From Refuge? If you're a fan of Millstone, you're probably going to be more inclined to listen to Scarlet Envy than you are to the other two, which is why I think that also Scarlet Envy picked up a lot of secondary votes as the second band on that one, or possibly first band. And that's why I think those bands went through. So bands could, and that could be a big factor go into the final. Obviously, we know Simon Hall does the final vote, and he will pick whatever band he feels right on the night, who played the best and does the best performance. But getting there, it's been about the audience. And I think as it becomes more judge orientated, it could be more of a challenge in certain bands where it's less about the audience vote. But every band that we've listed today, all of them could easily make the final. There's none of them that you kind of go, well, I don't understand why they're there. All of them deserve to be at quarterfinal stages.
Agreed. Yeah.
I would like to see, though, I mean, seeing like last, I mean, you saw it, Kirk. It wasn't a busy night last Sunday.
Very poorly attended, Andy. When we were there, I reckon there were probably less than 15 people watching A Killer. That's not their fault. I mean, the first time the weather wasn't great. Yeah, I was disappointed. Whereas the turnout, I think the best turnout was it. It probably was the one with Buried on Sunday, wasn't it?
They had a good turnout. Yeah, there's been a couple. Heat 3, I think, was pretty good as well. And so there's a couple have been really good. So I would really encourage bands. It makes such a big difference when you have a decent crowd, for not just for your own band, but for every other band. It makes the night more enjoyable. It means that even bands that have not maybe got through to the next stage, they've played in front of a good crowd. They've had a good evening. They don't mind it as much. So I think it's really important that the bands now that getting quarterfinal stage really put the work in about driving these gigs rather than it just being another gig that you're playing around the corner in another bar at the Horn or at the Corn Exchange or one of these other places. It's a really important one because there is consequences at the end. So I think it's important. Okay, so let's have a think. Now, although we're going to say there's a whole lot of bands we've listed, what are your 4 bands that you think will potentially make the final? Now, we can't control that because there's judges involved, and each judge has got different viewpoints. I know me and Andy and me and you, Kirk, we judged last week and we gave different scores out because we scored it in a different opinion on what we saw. So it is going to be very difficult with the different judges. But if you were to say which 4 bands do you think will be there at the end, who would you say? Oh, shall I go first then?
Yeah, go on. Yeah,
I give you a chance to see who you think.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Sentient will be there. I think Before the Sirens will be there. I think Buried on Sunday will be there. And I think Millstone will be there. That's my guess. Sorry, Scarlet Envy. I'm sorry. I feel so bad saying it, but
I know from sort of speaking to people involved, you know, fortunately for me, Scarlet Envy and Sentient aren't drawn together in the same quarter final. So they may well both progress to the semis. I agree with you, Dave. I think Sentient will definitely be in the final. Buried on Sunday really did impress me. I've seen them before. I've listened to their album this week, Kirk, and it is fantastic. There's such a variation in the songs, in the vocals, in the guitar sound, everything. It's a really strong album, and I'll be going back to that. You know, I think Extreme Death Art will do well, but I think if they can't bring a singer in who's going to deliver the vocals on the songs, I think that'll impede them. If they had a full lineup, I think they'd do very well. But I don't think they'll get to the final. I'm gonna go Sentient, Buried on Sunday. I think Low Down.
Okay.
I can't say about, how good Velour Fog or Concrete Gods were. Before the Sorrow and the Scarlet Envy, so I'm going for 4 out of 5. But like you said at the beginning of this piece, such a strong quarterfinal lineup. And there's nobody there who shouldn't be there on their own merit. So we'll just have to see how it progresses, and we'll have perhaps we'll discuss this again after the quarters.
Maybe, you never know. Go on, Kirk. What do you reckon?
So I should say at the start, probably my favourite band in this is Burdensome, and they've never got the vocals right live on the 4 occasions I've seen them. And I found out, didn't I, Dave? We spoke to the sound engineer, and the boys in Burdensome had basically asked for the sound levels to be too high. So that's their own fault. And they should have listened to what the sound engineer was saying, because if I could hear Declan's vocals, probably the best band in this competition for me. And we've heard them on record now, and wow, that is real top quality death metal. And there's not enough of that in this competition. I didn't see Swarmed, and I know they're my type of band from what I've experienced when we were watching the highlights. So big hopes for them. And Extreme Death Art, I agree, Andy. I would definitely have voted for them. I just wasn't at that gig. So from the remaining bands, Buried on Sunday, great songwriters. I've got to say, 70, I think that's the one band we all agree on, isn't it? They are so tight at the moment. They really are. Really
stepped up from last year as well.
They're really operating at full tilt, aren't they, that band? And you can see they're confident and enjoying themselves. Let's have a think. Yeah, I mean, Scarlet Envious, they're such strong songwriters, and it's good to see them go through. And I'd love it if they were to win it. Same also with Before the Sirens. I think the 3 bands that stand out as songwriters are Buried on Sunday, Scarlet Envy, and Before the Sirens. These are bands that genuinely do have really clever bridges and choruses, and they know when to put the middle 8 mosh parts in. And there's actually, they're quite technical underneath the simplistic song structures. So that, to me, that's very intelligent music when you're able to do that. But the 4th one, let's sort of think. I don't want it to be wishful thinking. Now, do you know, Wildcard, Velour Fog? There's no one like them in the band. There
isn't anyone like them.
Dangerous band. No. The only problem with them, and I hope they don't get offended, they do look like they are fucking class A drug addicts. I just, when you see them, it's like I don't even know if I should interview them. They just look.
I love the way you go. I hope they don't get offended. Really?
Honestly,
no, that's a compliment. Well done, Kirk.
They just look like they fucking live and breathe that on the edge rock and roll lifestyle, a bit like Megadeth did in the 80s. And I don't mean Sunset Strip Boulevard either. There's just something about that band that I have to take a step back. They are dangerous.
You'll be pleased to know
I'm gone down by 4
on the 10th of May. So
I'll join you on it. I hope they're not offended.
I'll find out when I do the interview.
First question: are you drug addicts?
Yeah.
Our subscribers just gone down by 4.
Say that again, mate.
Fertile. So our subscriber count just gone down by 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Sorry, Velour Fog. Great band. But anyway, they're my wild card, so I'll go for them as the 4th.
Okay.
Jane's Addiction meets Eddie Van Halen meets Rage Against the Machine. Don't even know how to describe them.
I hope based on what we've already said, I really hope that when we get to the quarterfinals, personally, and I know this has been something you guys are aware of because we're all part of the judges chat group. I hope Buried on Sunday do not do a cover in the quarters. I think
it's not too many songs as well. They don't need to.
They don't. I filmed them doing a full 1 hour set before, so they have enough material. They shouldn't be doing. Personally, what we want to see from bands in a battle of the bands is showing your writing skills. So we want to see original material. I believe Buried on Sunday was the only one that's done a cover this year. So I really hope, and me personally, I wasn't a judge on that, but me personally, I would have marked the band down for songwriting if you put a cover in, because that shows me that you haven't been able to write a song or enough songs to fill a set, which is not good. But
So
that's just something.
I did judge that heat, and I didn't penalise them for that.
And it's weird. In our judges group, some judges were fine as long as the cover was done well. If you did it and you did a bad cover, then you would get massively marked down.
Oh yeah,
that's what they were talking about. So I just personally think I'd like to see all bands just doing original materials, because that's what you're here for. One other thing I've got for here around talking about Metal to the Masses is it started out a few years ago where we had headliners for the quarterfinals and the semi-finals and final. And then in recent years, it's become we've had headliners for the heats. Do you feel, I mean, from each of you, I'm interested in your viewpoint. Do you feel that having headliners is beneficial to the heats or not? What's your viewpoints on them?
I think it's the first year. I might be wrong. I'd say it's the first year they've been in the heats. I'm almost certain that's the case. I mean, I'm glad you brought up headliners because I would have done anyway. But there've been some really good ones. Previously, they've all been either out of town bands who may or may not play Club 85 before, or previous winners, or people who have sort of competed in a Bloodstock via the competition, which I think was great. We've got sort of more this year, sort of some local favourites, bit of a mix so far. But I mean, the headliners, I think, are a real good addition to the heat.
Okay.
It does affect the start time, which you touched on earlier, Dave. People sometimes miss the first band. If you don't see the first band, unless you're a fan of that band, you're annoyed you missed them, you're not going to vote for them, you know, as in a Killer's case. But, you know, the headliners have been great this year. Really have been good. You know, Great to see Phobator again. Denali opening the competition, you know, on Heat 1. One of my favourite bands, Planet Fatale, headlining as well. I think it's a real good addition to the format and the competition, personally.
Kirk, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm in favour of it. Do it from Heat 1 all the way through to the final. And the good thing is you're inviting alumni back who've been part of the competition before. Denali even played Bloodstock last year, didn't they? Jackal's Backbone, the previous winners, they headlined as well. Really good standard, and to me, it is a reason to stay around. Even though I don't know those four bands, often I do know the headliner. I mean, I'd be going anyway, but I'm not too sure they pull in many local people to those gigs, though, do they? And if you're traveling from London or Milton Keynes or even further afield, yeah, it's really hard to bring a crowd with you on a Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah.
So from that, for that, they don't actually bring many people to the gigs, but most of these are top-notch bands, aren't they? We're fans of
the thing
in
is,
the middle of time.
I think the problem we've got with the headline acts is that they're all good bands. They've all been really good this year, but I thought the original idea, I mean, I might be wrong. I thought the original idea of having the headliners was it would give it a little bit more pomp, and it was only originally on the later stages, so you only had to have like maybe 4 or 5 headliners lined up, but they were to help get genuine people through the door, because the lower bands were always meant to be bands that were less known. As you'd have this big headliner, people would come out to see the headliner and support these other younger bands.
Yeah,
I'm seeing more people turn up for the bands playing the heats than the actual headliners. So when I've also noticed, I don't know if you guys notice it, that when the headliners play, they always start to almost an empty room in a lot of cases, and then slowly people start to filter back in. So we're not seeing that kind of transition. I'm wondering whether or not the heat shouldn't have headliners and we should go back to quarterfinals, semi-finals, and just focus on having bands that actually generate potentially volumes. And maybe we just need a slightly later start so more bands potentially can get seen, or more people see the 4 bands that are competing. maybe that's a way to do it, and then just have music playing while everyone kind of mills around waiting for the results. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is nice to see them, but I haven't seen any of the headliners really bring a lot of people in, which is a shame.
It's a shame. Yeah, it's disappointing. I think you touched on last week wasn't a great attendance, and Old Horntooth, I'd love to see them. They would have, it's disappointing they've come from wherever they've come from and headline to perhaps a fairly low populated venue. When it was bandied around, and I don't know how far and how realistic this idea was going to be, but I did hear they was going to have non-competing, up and coming, perhaps first gig bands opening the cheat, which would have allowed you then to see all the competing bands if you did arrive a little bit late.
But yeah, I mean James from
Mill as well as I can't remember which one, but 6 night would have been tough. But if you've got a band who are just finding their feet and cutting their teeth on the live stage, it's a great opportunity, and it gives people the opportunity to get to the venue and not miss the competing bands. But
yeah, I mean, one of the things, there's a couple of the guys have mentioned in the live chat. So we've got James from Millstones mentioned that.
Hi, James.
The Heat headliners are a double-edged sword. It ups the entertainment level and adds to the crowd. Great. But also those bodies that are coming to watch the headliners may not turn up till much later. So they get voting slips, but only have seen the last couple of bands, which means only those bands are getting the potential votes again. So we're not seeing every band through. So that's one problem with having the headliners in that case.
good point, James.
Nicholas Scott mentions having the guest headliners is a good networking opportunity, which is another bonus for competing bands to actually have a chance to meet these other bands and speak. So, and usually the headliners are obviously playing in some of the better venues or doing it for a little bit longer. So yeah, good points both from James and Nicholas on that one.
Yeah.
So interesting. So we've got a few things there. So we've got audience votes, we've got the headliners, we talked about that one. I don't know who the judges are as far as the rest of the year now for the quarterfinals and semis. But it is one thing I've always been interested about the judging. Yes, we've all been given this criteria of how to score it, but it's all down to your personal listening opinion. So something that I really like, I can judge it and go, well, that's really well written song. Whereas if it had been something like Old Horntooth, if that was a competing band, it's completely not my sort of thing, and I'd be like, songwriting ability 2 out of 10 because it's 4 chords.
It's out of your comfort zone, isn't it? Yeah, and you're being fair though. You can't just give it. We can't just be sympathetic, and we don't want to. It's not about upsetting people, but with art, we all have an opinion, and we're all emotional about it. So we are going to make value judgments. That's just what we do, don't we?
It would just be nice. I don't know whether or not if from the judging, which is why I had hoped that Danny was going to join us today, but I was wondering if there is a centralized judge every week who just goes through the scores and just checks them and goes, actually, well, I listen to this all the time and I've got a wide range of music and I'm thinking, hang on, this scoring is a bit odd compared to what I've seen. Why is the scores the way it is? I don't know. But I think that was something I'd really like from maybe get an update from Danny or Cassie or Bob or any of them, just because I don't know if there is one judge every week that's the same. I know there's always 3 guest judges, but is there a 4th one that kind of works on it?
I know. Dave, can I just, on this point, I judged Heat 6, which had Swarmed, Dialects, Buried on Sunday and Psycho Drive. Now, that was a perfect heat for me because I've got no connection with any of those bands. It's not the sort of music I usually listen to. Swarmed, Buried on Sunday and Dialect all would fall in the same genre. Sort of, I don't know, what do you call it, Kurt? Metalcore, melodic metalcore, whatever. It's not my usual style of music. So I can judge those bands objectively based on the criteria, songwriting, the performance.
Yeah, because you're not invested in them. You don't.
That being, these are one of those is a death metal band. They're going to score more highly than the other 2. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that, so for instance, when we scored things like A Killer and Veil of Fog, they were both very similar in my scoring. Different points in different categories, but the overall final score was very similar for me, even though they're very different. And I prefer personally Veil of Fog's music than I would A Killer, but I could judge it. But I was just wondering from that. We've got a couple of messages came through before we wrap up, because we've got Dave from Lowdown about to join us. So we've got David from Hereward says, I agree with the chance of networking and gaining advice from bands that have been on the circuit for a while, but the late finish can also be an issue for people working next day. Not so much on the Battle of the Bands, Metal to the Masses, but it can be on other nights. And Far From Refuge said, real nice insight. Thanks for what are your thoughts on sharing feedback or even the scores with the competing bands? Now, from my understanding, I don't think they do the scores. They won't give you the score breakdowns, but they will, if you ask for it, you will be given feedback from the judges, but you do have to ask. So Far From Refuge, if you ever wanted that, the judges from that heat should have that information, hopefully still. But I kind of asked about whether they should do it automatically. They should just be an automatic summary sent out to the bands after every one, just to make it so they've got that info. They shouldn't have to chase it, me personally. Don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't share the numeric scores with them, even though I'm going back on what I said. You know, as judges, we do have to be mature and respectful and give constructive criticism, don't we? And it doesn't, if you've scored a band 3 out of 10 on average, what does that say to that band? That's going to knock the confidence. But if you can just give the feedback and say, you turned up late, you overran on your set, the solo was out of key on the 3rd track, and your drums, you know, the snare was muffled in the mix. That's feedback they can learn from. You know, your setup could be better.
Okay.
But if you would just give those scores as well, they'd be thinking, oh, that person thinks that we're shit, and then they'll follow up on that. And it could, I just think we do need to be respectful, don't we, when we give our feedback, but we've got to be honest, because no one will ever improve or take risks. If everyone's just like, yeah, you're good at what you do. If you just keep getting that feedback, you don't even know what your purpose is as a band.
Constructive feedback is vital. But it does sound there's a few of the guys have mentioned in the chat here that they've asked for it and they've been given the feedback straight away. So it's, if you do ask for it, you will receive. Right, we have Alan and Dave now joining us. Let me let them into the room. Dun, dun, dun.
In fact, Lowdown probably should have been my 4th choice. Thinking about it now, but too late.
Too late. Right, let's let the boys in.
Goes online. Hello,
yes, Al. There's
Hello,
Dave. Hello.
Hello.
Right, let's see if Al's audio is connected. No, you're muted, Al.
You're on mute.
Al's still muted. Hey,
Al.
hello.
Here I am. Say hello.
Hello, Al. Hello,
Hello.
Dave. How you doing?
Good.
Alan.
How are you?
Alan.
Very
Hello.
well.
Oh, don't you start. Don't fucking start that, Dave. I've literally been here like 30 seconds. Don't start.
Hang on. Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to take my.
Honestly.
Well, you fucking specified it.
Have you got a Before the Sirens t-shirt on? You have?
Hey, never.
Who has? Yes. Get in there.
Represent.
Long sleeve. Hoodie, long sleeve.
Hey.
Oh, you spoil me.
Shall I go and get
Oh,
mine?
look at you all. David,
Alan, do you want to share your band's
Lowdown
news
t-shirt
that's been
on
announced
last
today?
Sorry?
Alan, do you want to
Hello.
share your band's news that's been announced today, in case anybody hasn't seen it?
Thank you. We had confirmation this afternoon. It went out on the social medias that we'll be playing MoFest this year over at Melbourne Rock Club, bank holiday weekend in August. So yeah, it should be good fun. You were there last year, weren't you, Andy?
Certainly was our debut show. Brilliant little festival, and I've got no excuse not to go because it's literally 3 miles from my house.
So I'll buy you a pint, is what I said.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Any news from Lowdown that we can share as well while we've got you here, Dave?
Oh, there's a lot. Not sure if I'm able to share anything yet. But we're talking to Kariga to get them over here. So hopefully
Cool. Get them a
at
club
some
85.
point, you know, once I've done the rest of the planning, I'll get them over here for a couple of dates. And they're well up for it. So yeah, Kariga going to
You'll
come
be going over there as well, aren't you, Dave? Playing a gig in Sweden?
We are indeed.
Exchange trip.
Yeah.
That should be
good.
fun.
Networking, as Nicola said in the chat. You're right. You know, what could be better? So
Yeah, it should be good. Going to go to IKEA, pick up some desks, maybe. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure there's other things in Sweden than IKEA, Dave.
Pretty certain there's not. I think
It's
Kariga.
just one big giant IKEA.
Isn't it IKEA anyway? If you watch the adverts.
I don't know, mate. You'd know.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Alan.
Right. Should we talk? Look, we've got some questions. So I have set these guys some questions. You've had them for about at least, I don't know, 10 days, something like that. I should say, originally we were planning to have Mike from Kodama also on the channel today, but unfortunately Mike didn't finish work on time, unfortunately. So Mike is going to join us at the end of May's live stream instead. So hopefully, as long as he's not working. So apologies for that. Okay, so I've got 6 questions I set these guys to talk about. And the first one is, who is each of ours favorite singer or front person, whichever way you want to call it, and the reason why? So I thought this would be quite an interesting one. Now, before we do that, would anyone like to try and guess the other persons who we think their first favorite person is? I think Andy should go first as far as telling us who your favorite singer is. I'm going to guess it's Aaron Stainforth because that's the only person that I know that you like. So I'm going to say it's Aaron Stainforth.
Yes, you're right.
Yay!
Dave, is this our personal favorite singer who we think the best singer is?
No, personal favorite.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is like.
I guess Kirk's.
Yeah,
Go on.
I'd have a go at
you-
that as well. You go first, Andy.
You know, it could be several. I'm going to go Mike Patton,
Yeah, that's what I would have said.
Correct. Mike Patton, first Lamar, Mr. Bungo.
Robert Smith, close second, perhaps. I don't know.
Chris Cornell
Okay.
as well, and Devin Townsend.
Okay, we might as well guess each person's then, and then we can go back to asking why then as we started this way. Should we try and guess who Alan's favourite singer is?
Yes.
Yeah, I reckon it.
Jesse Leach.
Jesse Leach. Maybe Howard Jones from Killswitch.
Oh yeah, Howard Jones is a good point actually, because he's more of a clean singer. So actually, yeah, Howard Jones is the one I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for Chino Moreno as your
Deftones.
favorite. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Could
Interesting,
be James Hetfield as well, with the guitar on the back.
Oh right, yeah. It's hiding behind there somewhere.
Oh,
You can't
yeah,
see
yeah,
past the chair.
Andy, you got any ideas?
No, not. Yeah, I'd go with the Kill Switch guys.
Apparently, someone reckons it's Miles Kennedy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
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 Is it Miles Kennedy?
There's two. Yeah, there's two of them really. Miles in his day and Howard. Yeah, man, definitely.
Wow! Congratulations to ADP. Who's ADP? Don't know. Someone called ADP. Guess that.
I don't recognise that handle, but yeah, yes, very good.
Is that the ADP Rock and Metal channel that have joined us?
There's a new one trying to take our mantle. How dare you?
Come on, who do we think for Dave? I think we've got to think.
That wild.
So does Zach Wild do the vocals for Black Label Society?
Of
Yeah.
course he does. Yeah.
It's gotta be Zach Wild.
No. I'm going to go for Chris Cornell, Soundgarden. I think he's your favorite vocalist of all time.
I think in terms of his songwriting and his melodies and whatnot, I would go for a bit of a left field one and go Mark Tremonti in Tremonti.
Ah.
Ooh.
Well, glad you asked. So it's actually really difficult because I'm actually very similar to Alan. That in its day, Miles Kennedy, hands down, I would stroke his member because he was just untouchable, absolutely untouchable. However, and actually me and Alan were talking the other day about this, actually about Miles Kennedy, that he doesn't sing the same anymore. He doesn't belt it out anymore. He goes for his head voice, which is the more falsetto than actually using his diaphragm to push. So I think now it would probably be Mark Tremonti.
Okay.
Dave.
Dave, yes. How about to Dave? Who was on his idols list, Kirk? Been so long ago.
Yeah, so he
Flynn, wasn't it?
had
Rob
Pitch
Flynn was on there?
Shifter, The Wanted, Rob Flynn from Machine Head, Alec
Never going to guess it. It's never going to happen.
Ronnie James Dio. Oh no, you don't like that. that era of Black Sabbath there.
Rob Halford.
Hard rock. It's going to be a hard rock singer, isn't it? If we,
I reckon it might be someone like Rob Plant.
Lizzie Hale.
oh,
How
yeah.
the hell did you get
Why
that?
we
get
got
it?
thinking that's
Oh,
it? We just
yeah.
got the male vocalist, yeah, Lizzie Hale.
Lizzie,
I
how
knew
did
that's the
you?
answer.
What?
Yeah, and rightly so. Great choice.
Yeah, great singer.
As soon as you said rock, it's because he said rock singer, and then he went, "Oh yeah, who does he like rock people wise?" Damn it! I thought that was going to be a tough one.
I was going
Right.
to say who's our favorite female vocalist then, but not that we should be separated.
No, I was originally going to do that, and I thought, well, let's not
Yeah.
like split by stereotype,
No.
female, male. It's whoever's your favorite. So
Sorry,
we now need
Bjork.
to go round.
Yeah, sorry, Bjork. Sorry, Tatiana from Ginger.
Okay, so Andy, Aaron Stainford, why is he your favorite singer?
Just because of his creative talent, really. I mean, he's the lyricist, and if you've read any or followed any My Dying Bride lyrics, they're just full of wonderful language. He creates characters, he creates stories. You know, when he's sort of singing the songs live, he becomes the characters, you know, the protagonist in each of these tales. They're just sort of, you know, it's got such a range of vocal styles as well, from, you know, the beginning of My Dying Bride's career up to date. He's got, you know, a fantastic look, just performance-wise. I don't know, it's hard to categorise really, and it does probably boil down to the fact that he's the front man of my favourite band. So nothing more elaborate than that really. He's just a very talented man, not just inside band itself, you know, photography and artwork and all this kind of thing. But yeah, I just love what he and his brand creates, from, you know, the music, the imagery, the sort of artwork, everything. Nothing more sort of contrived than that. He's just,
You just love it.
a very talented vocalist, performer, songwriter, lyricist, artist in general. Yeah.
Okay, Kirk, for you, why did you pick Mike Patton?
Yeah, I'll start with Devin Townsend giving an interview and saying this is the person we all learned how to do that good cop, bad cop vocal style from. It's the 1992 album Angel Dust. And that was the first time I'd heard a heavy record. I remember when I finally understood it, thinking, I'm just listening to the vocals here. I don't even care about the guitars, you know, even though they're really impressive. And I'd never had that experience listening to heavy music because I was a guitar player by training at the time, and I would just listen and think, oh, are they playing a D minor pentatonic solo there, or that's a nice key change. And then that was the first time I heard music and started really listening to the vocals. And he has got, you could almost say, I don't think we use the term split personality now, do we? But there are so many different personalities in his vocals. He can do anything. You know, he can do the John Tardy obituary death metal rasp, and then he can do the Lionel Richie croon. It's just incredible. And you watch Faith No More live, and he can just flip it like a switch, and he's never going to lose his vocals. It's just natural talent. But yeah, the other ones I would consider would be Greg Puciato from Dillinger Escape Plan, certainly Devin Townsend, and yeah, I have always liked Chris Cornell. That 1991 album, Bad Motorfinger. Wow, that is incredible. Just one last point. I want to pick up on Dave said, though. Everyone I've mentioned, you're right, Dave. I don't think any of them can sustain later on in their career what they were doing. They all changed their style. Can I just ask, is that something that you have to do as you age, do you think? Change your style?
I mean, I don't know because I'm not that old, but
True, yeah, that was not my point.
But I do think it's probably natural, just human growth. You know, everyone at some point blows their voice out and they've got to relearn something. So it could be down to that. It could be down to stylistically changing. Look at Corey Taylor from Slipknot. He's massively changed his style. I mean, Slipknot, the latest album, doesn't sound anything like the early stuff because they've just grown. So maybe it's that. Yeah.
On that, a good example of that, Kirk, the band that I think you've heard me mention before, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah.
Their second album, No Place for Disgrace, their vocalist Eric AK, what a voice he has on that album. It's, you know, power, really high notes as well. They done a re-recording of that album 20 years later, and his vocal approach is just sort of, you know, it's almost the bare minimum output. You know, the high notes he's kind of shying away from, and I think, as you said, Dave, it's just natural aging of the human body, which affects everything, including your singing voice.
Yeah. It's a muscle, so they get tired, they get achy, they get old. Need work. Alan, go on for you. So to explain why, whichever one you're going to pick, or both, why they all.
Do you know my reasons are the same for both? If I'm honest, it's and in slightly different ways, I suppose. Is tone and range, and what I mean by that is that both. So, like in Miles' sense, he's got a vocal tone that I just love. First time I really came across it was on the One Day Remains album that Alterbridge released first, and I hadn't at that point heard anything like it. The range the man had at that point was just unreal. I've mentioned it before. Obviously I kind of found Killswitch Engage when Jesse was still in the band, but then they released Rosa Sharon and then End of Heartache to follow, and Howard just has his character. The character on that man's voice, I believe, is second to none. But of course, he's got the flip side of having that real raw, aggressive metal screaming tone underneath it. And it's I can't quite explain it other than a character and a tone. It's a feel that I think they both had. Earlier in their career. Howard still probably has it now, but I've not heard much back from Light the Torch in their new band. Recently, they had an album a few years ago, but I've yet to see what they're doing right now. But that was just character and tone. But to on the point of vocalists kind of like fading later, I believe in the same way that Brian Johnson had to stop with AC/DC, it was because of his hearing, and I believe that's why Miles is struggling. That's why they've got those Perspex noise shields in front of the cymbals. I think it's because he really struggles to hear, and so therefore he has to back off. And of course, if you can't hear what you're singing, you're not in tune, you're going to struggle, aren't you?
Yeah.
They've actually started using it in ears.
Yeah. But I don't like. I saw Alterbridge on their first UK tour in like 2005, I think, something silly like that. And they were. You could smoke in the gig room back then, so there was smoke everywhere. There was no in-ears whatsoever, and nearly 20 years ago. But I imagine that you would struggle if you're doing that almost like 300 days of the year. But yeah, they're my two. That's why it's it's tone, it's character, and there are loads of them for that reason. Frankly.
Okay, over to you, Dave.
Yeah. So to be fair, it's very much in the same vein as Alan. It's I prefer character in vocals rather than amazingly technical, like blow your fucking head off kind of vocals. I prefer like a tone or like a characteristic. So originally I loved Miles Kennedy's voice, and I still do, I really do, but in the last maybe 6-7 years, maybe, it might be a little bit unfair to put a time frame on it, but his vocals live, from what I've seen, aren't quite doing the same thing, because he uses his head voice, which gives a different tone and a different characteristic to the higher notes, which need power. And like Alan said, they've started using in-ears because of hearing problems, and I think because of that, he's then also changed how he does things. But since he started doing that, I adore Mark Tremonti's way of writing, as in like riffs and songs, and his voice has just skyrocketed within the last maybe 5 years. It's just gone mental. I mean, it could be that he always had those pipes but never used them because Miles Kennedy was there. But hearing earlier Mark Tremonti stuff, he's got such like a clean vibrato, and it's just really characteristic. It's him straight away, which is why he then went on to play with the Frank Sinatra's band and do a charity album with Frank Sinatra's band, and to do a load of Frank Sinatra covers, and they're wicked, man. They're really good. So yeah, that's probably why I like Tremonti, because he almost sings like Miles, but a little bit more powerful on the low end. He can't reach the same notes, of course not. I don't think anyone can. But yeah, so I'd probably say that would be why I like characteristic voices or anyone that sounds different. So yeah.
All right. So before I give mine, I'm just going to read out a few of the comments that have come through in the chat. So James from Millstone says, with a lot of these big singers, I think the brutal touring schedule takes a big toll on your voice after 10, 20, 40 years, etc. A stranger guys have said Greg Pucciato, yeah, that guy. For me, amazing screams and great cleans. So they're one of his favorite bands or vocalists. Ant from Lowdown says Miles confirmed he has awful ears nowadays, and also says Anders from In Flames has an amazing ability to transform from singing to screaming.
Yeah,
He's not the best clean singer, but he can switch it up so smoothly. So there's some comments from Ant as well there. Okay, so why did I pick Lizzie Howell?
She's phenomenal.
She's phenomenal. It's again, we've almost all said the same word, range. It's the fact she has a beautiful clean voice. She has a huge amount of power in her screams. She can get guttural, she can get aggressive. She's got an amazing character in her voice. There are a lot of singers that I like, but depending on my mood, I may not be in the mood for their vocal. So we talked about Zakk Wylde. I love Black Label Society, but there are some times I'm like, I'm just not in the mood for his vocal tone. But with Lizzie Howell, she's got a vocal tone for every mood. So I can put it on any Hailstorm album and I'll love it no matter what mood I'm in. There'll be something in there for me, whereas I don't think I have that in any other band. I don't get that sort of variety from an album or from a vocal performance. So that's why Lizzie Howell is basically my favourite singer. There we go. That was our first topic. Very good. Right, we're moving on to our second topic of the day. So before I do that, I should make sure we just remind everyone who these other guys are on the ADK channel. Of course, Dave from Lowdown, and of course, Alan from Before the Sirens. Okay, the next question is, was nu metal as bad as everyone says it was? And why does it have that reputation? So this has come up quite a lot because obviously every time we talk about nu metal or some sort of nu metal riff comes up on it, Kirk loses his shit, basically, and says how much he hates it. And I liked nu metal when it came out. But it became kind of a joke thing about, oh my God, it's so bad. Limp Bizkit, nu metal, it's just awful. But was it actually that bad? Anyone got any particular thoughts on this? Want to kick this off?
I'm quite happy to jump in if you want.
Go for it.
So, because I had a decent thought about this and ended up listening to a load of it myself because it reminds me of being like a teenager, right? But not all of it, and I'll come to that in a sec. So, in the same way that if you consider any sort of what would be deemed to be a faddy sort of genre of music, i.e. a genre of music that had its time and went, there's something about it. It taps into, a sociological kind of thinking at the time. Seemed to be a lot of kind of angst knocking around in music in general. And it was that sort of, it's almost like the sort of anti-standard kind of metal. It was completely anti, your generic, not generic, that's not the right word, your sort of stereotypical metal stereotypes, as I say. But basically, you usually had a bunch of guys stood on stage all in black, headbanging and playing really fast, really heavy stuff, and then you got the likes of Limp Bizkit, like you say, that turned up in backwards baseball caps and face paint, and yeah, they're still by their own rights heavy, but it was a change. Now, the reason I say that it had its place is that it's a bit like something. I'm sure we all had something that we wore when we were younger, and we were like, "I look wicked," and then you look back at a picture of yourself and go, "I look like a twat." Right? That's what nu metal is. Yeah. Right? Nu metal is where it had its time, but the people playing it, obviously in their 20s, 30s at that time, 20, 30 years later, it doesn't age well. It doesn't wear well over time. So it's not something that you can keep repeating because it ages. And then the problem was that in the same way as all these kind of genres that pop up and then disappear, you get a sort of saturation of it. So the sort of bad ones almost become popular by proxy, and so therefore that kind of reinforces the impression that it's just awful, because ultimately there are some really, really good ones that were around in and around its sort of heyday, but by the end of it, it was just regurgitations of the same old stereotypes, the same old riffs, the same old looks, the same old attitudes, the same old, you know, rap metal singing about how much he hates his dad, that kind of vibe. And it becomes samey, and then everybody jumps on the bandwagon and goes, that's crap, right? It's crap. And that was crap, and it was always crap, and it just becomes. So in essence, do I think it's as bad as everybody says it was? No, there are probably an album's worth of songs from different bands that I would go back to and go, oh yeah, that was a tune, I like that. But why does it have a bad reputation? Because it didn't wear well. It's like that really cool t-shirt you had when you were a kid and you thought you looked wicked and you didn't.
Yeah.
You know you didn't.
Okay. Anyone else got any viewpoints on this that want to chip in at this point?
Yeah, I think it. I think with new metal specifically, I think the reason everyone thinks that it was so bad is because it defined a generation of wankers. Let's face it.
That's not bad.
Everyone that was growing up at that time, they're a bit divvy. Do you know what I mean? They're a bit like just not quite with it. And I'm part of that generation. You know, I do think that, you know, me growing up around about that time, perfect example is from Woodstock 99. You know, tried to replicate Free Love, and he was an absolute fucking idiot to think he could do that, personally speaking, just my opinion. But no one wanted that at the time, because you had bands exactly like Alan pointed out, Limp Bizkit, which were making everyone full of angst. Oh, everyone, the world hates you. You are owed this, you know, fuck the world. Middle fingers were up everywhere. So how on earth are you going to look back on angsty times and be like, yeah, that was awesome? Because it probably wasn't as we were growing up. But I do think in the same breath that I really liked Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavored Water. Like, one album. That was awesome because it was different. You know, they got onto the mainstream public eye and it was just awesome. I thought it was really good. And I've revisited that recently. Pardon me. And yeah, I think that's really good. But then you've got other bands like Linkin Park. They were just, well, I don't think they were created out of necessity, but obviously there was an empty vessel of music and they kind of joined in with that. And they defined, even now, they defined that sort of like almost subgenre of like new metal and stuff. And I don't think that there were bands that should have been in the new metal sort of like wave. I don't think Deftones should have been classed as new metal. But for some reason they get put in with that. So I just think it was down to, at that point, the world was in a certain stasis, and that new metal was the soundtrack to that time. So I think if everyone was to look back at that, you know, like we all did, like Alan said, you know, wearing a flame shirt thinking, yeah, look at me, mum. I'm wicked.
You're
and then
good.
you're still wearing a flame shirt, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I go to Kirk, because I know Kirk's going to have plenty to say on this, I want to throw over to Andy, because Andy, you do like a new metal band.
Yeah, I do. If the class is that. Aside from Stained, my new metal experience, it really relies on the ones that were on the old sort of video channels back in the day. So you like your Linkin Parks, Limp Bizkit. I've got Chocolate Starfish. I think it's a great album, but you know the other sort of main big hitters like Deftones and the like, I've never really heard of, to be honest. So yes, absolutely love Stained. I think they do fall into that new metal group. And I agree with Dave and Alan. It does place us in a certain time frame. You know, sort of the 90s, early 2000s. It's sort of it's that period of time in music, and it's sort of just sort of lives there really. And is it as bad as people make out? No, it isn't, because I liked a few tracks, a few albums, a few bands, and it's a scene that people did like and was very popular. So it doesn't deserve the sort of bad rap that it sometimes gets. There were some absolute bangers coming from that time.
Okay.
Especially Stain.
Go on, Kirk. I know you've got a few viewpoints on this.
Yeah, I should start with the positives then. If everyone's expecting me to just rail against nu metal and say it was an aberration, the origins of nu metal, I love all those bands: Faith No More, Primus, Helmet, Rage Against the Machine, even early Red Hot Chili Peppers. These are top quality bands that we would have called alternative at the time. You're right, Dave, there was no such thing as alternative metal. The origins, again, to me, nu metal is Korn. That first album is one of the best albums of all time. I think there's probably a consensus on that. That changed music, didn't just change rock and metal. You've got 5 dudes from LA, white, dreadlocks, dressed in Adidas tracksuits, playing 7-string guitars, bagpipes, and you've got a singer who's had a fucked up childhood and has a song called Daddy at the end of that album where he has this spontaneous outer body moment where he relives the trauma of being sexually abused. I don't think anyone had ever heard anything like it. It's one of the darkest albums ever produced. Now, the irony with nu metal is Korn, who created this new sound, which should have gone on, it did go on, didn't it, commercially to become a juggernaut, but it could have been better. And they are the reason, I think, why it went backwards with that 1998 album, Follow the Leader, which is utter shite.
No, it ain't. It's a great album.
They just turned it into a parody of themselves, right? And then every other nu metal band, they weren't influenced by the first Korn album. They were influenced by that Follow the Leader album. Have you heard that song, Children of the Corn, where Jonathan Davis and Fred Durst are rapping? It's the most embarrassing thing I've ever heard in my life. Cold Chamber, oh, awful band. Do me a favor, go and read the lyrics to the song Big Truck from their debut 1996 album. Jesus Christ, that is the most infantile, stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. The other thing, no technical ability on the guitars, but I do understand that. And there's nothing wrong with taking an inspiration from hip hop, as they were doing, and other genres. There was even a bit of industrial in there, wasn't there, in the second wave of nu metal. But the thing that really turned me off it, you had all these bands coming along, they were influenced by Korn, and I got the impression they were making up stories about their childhood. Oh, I had a shit childhood, so I'm going to have to write songs about this. It's like, did you? Jonathan Davis clearly has gone through a lot of shit. And you only have to listen to the last 2 albums. His wife died, didn't she? 3 years ago. And again, you put that on, you're like, Jesus Christ, this is intense music. But I think the bands they influenced were so shit. It just, as Alan said, it puts you off, and it shouldn't be like that. And my final point, and I'm going to throw it back at the end as a question to you guys. Nu metal just became an American genre that conquered the world. Can you tell me any good nu metal bands outside of the United States? In fact, can you tell me a nu metal band from New York? This was all coming from Los Angeles, really, wasn't it? Even the image of it, skater shorts, dreadlocks. How the fuck could I relate to that growing up in Northwest England, Lancashire?
So you never listened to 1 Minute Silence from the UK. Great nu metal bands.
They weren't bad. Who were the other bands? Earth-Tone 9, they weren't at that level, were they? You couldn't put them next to Korn. You're right, Dave. Deftones clearly have done well, outlived that. You could even say they've almost turned into like a post-metal band. I don't even know where they are now. They're really influential. They're a great band, aren't they? Even bands like Disturbed, to be fair, have done well to emancipate beyond nu metal. And you've had examples of bands who came in towards the end, but still managed to get out and go forward. Chimera being a good example. No one remembers that they were playing nu metal because they were such an excellent groove metal band. And Des Fafara, Devil Driver, good metal band to me. You wouldn't think that was the guy from Cold Chamber, but too Americanized. When you've got indie bands like Ben Folds 5 taking the piss out of Korn in their MTV videos, something's wrong. And then finally, when you've got members of the Backstreet Boys saying, oh, we want to do a side project, it probably is going to sound like Korn and Limp Bizkit. That's when you know that a genre has really fucking reached saturation point. So
I'll add just one last point, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago in one of our reaction videos. It bred this necessity for a superfluous band member, and it drove me crackers. Where you had one band member who was only there as almost like a hype man. He was like, he didn't do anything, but he was just there to go nuts, and it drove me to distraction. And I only remembered how annoyed I was about it when we did that reaction video the other day where the bloke was playing, and I quote this, a table. His instrument was a table, and it drove me mad. I was like, that is a waste of space, oxygen, energy, and everything else you're doing. But yes, anyway, that was my fight. You just reminded me of that, Kurt.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'd like a hype man.
A hype
We all
man.
want a hype man.
I'll be your hype man, Dave.
Where you can just shout Dave and hit the table.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up as far as my thoughts on it. So I think with the fact of new metal, as you said, like Korn came out in like 93. So you're talking like 94, 95 was the kind of the big launch of new metal.
It was
And we
exciting.
had about 5 years where we had quality new metal coming out. And I think the big change was 1999 Slipknot's debut album Hitting. That upped the game, and that showed that actually the quality of what you do with new metal could be taken to another level. The problem what we then had was turn of the century 2000. We had the guys that were listening to new metal at 95 had decided they wanted to be in bands and realized that new metal was basically just big power chords and not a lot else. And it was easy to do it was easier to become a new metal band than it was to become a classic metal band or a thrash band, or so let's be a new metal band. And then we got bands in 2000 called Crazy Town with their song Butterfly. And that killed new metal. That's it. That's the point when new metal died.
Have you seen them recently? They fought each other and they've been thrown off of the Head PE tour because the two singers were caught backstage beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's all on video.
So that's where I worked out. That was it. 1999 Slipknot album, 2000 Crazy Town. That's what killed new metal, and that's why.
Come, my lady, you're my butterfly, sugar, baby.
There you go.
We can have other music, by the way. Other than that,
Did they do any?
Oh, that's it. They just come out for one
as bad
song.
as you would expect it to be.
They offended people by doing a cover of that. You know, a lot of people really love that Swedish hardcore band Refused. Puritans were like, Crazy Town, they're not allowed to cover good music. You're like really offended by it. It's like, calm down.
So there we have our thoughts on new metal. There we go. That was interesting, I think. Anyway, right. We have the next question. This one shouldn't take too long to actually, this next question. So anyway, before I start the next question, just a reminder for anyone that's just joined and you're wondering who these other two people are from the ADK channel, we have Dave from Lowdown and we, of course, have Alan from Before the Sirens. Next question. I find this one's an interesting one. How many songs should a band play from a new album on the promotional tour that they go on? And the concept in my head here is obviously if it's your first album, you're going to play the whole album pretty much. But if you're someone like Metallica, they've just released a new album, 72 Seasons. How many of those songs would you expect to be played at a Metallica concert? Okay, no one wants to get in on that one. Andy,
I'll go. So, and I'll give you a kind of a case study, if you will, a story behind it. I think that obviously, as you say, if you have one album and it is that album, then you're going to play all of it, right? So that's kind of like, you know, like us as Before the Sirens, like we've got an EP coming out later this year. That's a plug. Didn't mean to, but never mind. And we will play that almost every show you see us because it's the body of our work, right? But we, a couple of us went to see Sleep Token a few months ago now, and was really into their sort of back catalogue and never seen them live before. Now it's a difficult watch because they have they don't speak because they wear masks and they're trying to hide their identities. They don't talk. So it's a bit of a tough watch. There's no sort of on stage charm because you can't. I mean, they're excellent live and like vocally, they have loads of energy on stage. And I mean, as I say, his vocals are fantastic and they were tight as anything. But what they did in the run up, so we saw them at the first date they did in the UK. And in the run up to that, they released two songs, of which I now forgot the name. The first two singles, they did one a day for like 7 days or something silly. So the first two One of them was called Chokehold, and the other one, the name has escaped me. But anyway, they'd released those 2 before that show. But what they did was their set comprised of all 7, 5 of which weren't even out yet. So you can imagine the middle of that set, they did 2 of their more popular back catalogue ones at the end, but the 5 in the middle, no one had ever heard before. So they could have been playing anything. No one, there was nothing to catch you. It wasn't involving as such, because usually, like as a gig goer, particularly if it's a band you're really into, part of the thrill is like singing along and knowing that the heavy bit's coming, or knowing that the big chorus is coming, or getting into the bit is coming, and you get excited about that. So from a new album, they could have, like for that gig, they could have got away and did play those first 2 singles, but they played them at the very, very start. So everybody went mental for 2 songs, and then for 5 songs, the crowd noise of people talking was louder than the band, because people were like, I don't understand what's going on here, because they were quite subdued in sort of, I don't know if you've heard any of their later releases, but they're almost R&B. It's quite down, like sort of the energy comes down a little bit, and it's more sort of mellow, and it really kind of sucked the energy out of the room. At later shows, they may have got away with that, but I suppose my point is that if you have a brand new album out, it's been out a matter of days, and people haven't managed to pick up on the lyrics and kind of get the melodies in their head and sing along, then you need to be relatively careful on, you play it all by all means, but be careful where you place it, because you need to keep that kind of, like for example, if Killswitch brought out a new album, they're not going to play all of that album in the middle and then finish with like The End of Heartache or My Last Serenade. They're going to smatter it around. So you can do as you please, depending on how long you're playing for. But I suppose what I'm getting at is that if you say you've written 4 new songs in between your last gig and today, you wouldn't put them all into one set, because no one's going to get into it, or like, unless they've seen you for the first time, in which case it doesn't matter. But your fans that have seen you before aren't going to have anything to kind of hold on to. And in some ways, I think that approach is a touch selfish, dare I say. But I think ultimately, I think you can play as many songs from a new album as you like, as long as you kind of are respectful to the fan base that have come to see you, in that it's not all in one lump, and you don't kind of self-indulge. That's my point.
So I'm just going to give you a couple of comments that we've had come through. So James from Millstone says you should do the singles plus 1 extra from the album if you're feeling spicy. Ant from Lowdown says you do 3, 1 at the early part, 1 around the middle, and 1 at the end to break it up. A Stranger says around 50% of your set should be new material. So that's the general gist. So depending on the length of, I mean, if you're a smaller band and you're doing maybe 8 songs in a set, so 4 songs, and it feels kind of, that's what generally everyone's sort of saying. You put your singles out, anything that you've basically released ahead of time that's not on the album, you put out there, maybe 1 extra if you see it. But I get that makes sense. I mean, I kind of think, like, the reason I bring up the Metallica one is I really don't want to hear Enter Sandman ever again live. I couldn't give a crap about that song. It's such a boring song. Sad but true. It's so boring.
Hey!
It's just that I'd much rather hear some of the other stuff. I'd like to hear songs they don't normally play, or new material or something like that, to show it's more interesting.
Okay,
especially
but then,
I've seen them many times before. But I think
sorry.
I suppose if it's your first time to see them, then you don't want to hear the classics. But
not to cut across you there, Dave. Sorry, but if you've paid your however much it is for a goddamn ticket these days, which I suppose should be another question on a one of these live streams later on, is how much gig tickets are. But if you've paid your £100 to go and see Metallica, you can be damn sure, even though it's been overly popularized again, obviously with the Stranger Things effect and everything else, you would want to see Master of Puppets, right?
Definitely.
It's got to be in the set list.
The thing is, you know there's going to be songs that have got, there's always the songs that have got to be in there. So you know that they're always going to have, as you said, Master of Puppets. You know Enter Sandman's got to be in there somewhere. So you can almost go through and pick the set. Okay, anyone else got any viewpoints on it? I think Alan's made a pretty much a solid case there. Dave,
sorry. Yeah, I do think that and actually in the comment, that's very similar to what I was going to say. I think it depends, one, how long your set is, two, how you're known at that gig specifically, and three, it depends how you set the actual set up, like the set of songs. Because from my standpoint, I do it in sets of almost beginning, a middle, and an end. Because not everyone wants to hear you talk before every fucking song. No one wants that. You know, you want to be able to blend in from one song to another. You want to make it look flawless. And then maybe do the new song after you start talking, because then you can introduce it. Then you can say, this is our new track from so-and-so. We've got a video out. We've got this, we've got that. Then you'd flow into maybe another song. And then maybe you'd talk about another song. So I'd probably say one at closer to the early part of the set, one towards the middle, and one maybe towards the end. So I'd probably say maybe three, maybe. I think it depends when you released it, depends the timing, depends what kind of PR you've been doing, depends what kind of social media pushes. But yeah, I'd probably agree with Ant, to be perfectly honest.
Can I just come in on the angle that Alan mentioned, because it's such a difficult question to answer, and let's get Andy's thoughts on this as well. Two examples. When a band falls out of love with the genre that they're playing. In fact, I'll give you three examples. Who remembers Paradise Lost in the early 2000s, where they just stopped playing metal, they all cut their hair, they were wearing designer gear, and they tried to be Depeche Mode. And I saw them twice around that era, and they would not play any of the early songs. It's like they were ashamed of them, you know, like with the growl vocals, and they didn't want to be associated with that extreme metal origin where they come from. And now they've gone full circle and they're one of the best bands in the world again. And then the other one, he remembers Billy Corgan saying in the late 90s, rock is dead. And then they lost Jimmy Chamberlain, their drummer, and they didn't play hardly any songs from Siamese Dream or Melancholy Infinite Sadness on that 1998 tour. And that is scandalous. Again, it's almost like, oh, you know, we're even better now that we've left that genre of music behind. So we're just going to play our album in its entirety. The irony is it's a great album, adore. And then the third example, not many people remember the Manic Street Preachers were a heavy rock band, the first three albums. And that last album before Richie Edwards disappeared, The Holy Bible, probably the best lyrical album I've got in my collection. And then they turned into almost like a middle of the road dad rock band. And again, James Dean Bradfield, surprisingly a top guitar player, and he just fell out of love with the instrument. And then you go and watch them, and yeah, you'd get Motorcycle Emptiness and You Lovers and a few songs like that, but they would just play probably 60-70% of songs from the current #1 album. So I think it's when bands are stubborn like that, it might be because they've fallen out of love with the genre and they're ashamed of what their early stuff is, even though a lot of fans are there to watch it. Or it could be stubbornness, as in every record we put out is better than the last one, and we're going to prove it to you. And we don't care if your opinion is that, no, it's not. We want to hear the classics. So it can be, it can also come from a bad place, that, you know, that attitude of playing everything from the current album.
Okay. Any other thoughts from that? Andy, did you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, I've got a recent example. I don't go to many big gigs. Last one being Obituary in February. They've got a new album out that we reviewed on the channel, Dying of Everything. And I was surprised how much of around an hour long set they played from that album. Probably 6 songs from the new album. And this is a band who's got 30 years of material to choose from. You know, there's lots of fan favourites, which they did play as well. But I just, going into that show, I was expecting perhaps, 3 or 4 from the new album, but it's more like 6. But it's a great show because it was an album I was familiar with, which contrasts the only time I've seen My Dying Bride on the, I think, For Lies I Sow was being toured, and I wasn't familiar with that album at all, and I was disappointed with how much of that they played, only because I wasn't familiar with it. So like I think what Alan said, you want to go there and you want to listen out for and expect to know when the big chorus is coming, when the big guitar solos come in. You want to know the material. I certainly enjoy bands live that I know the material. Many a time I've seen a band for the one and only time, I've come away thinking, oh yeah, I love these guys, and you think, I wish I knew their material before I stepped through the door. Do you know what I mean? That whole experience would have been so much better. But in answer to the questions on the table, I think it needs to be a sort of a pretty even mix. Like I think you said, Dave, maybe 1 or 2 at the beginning, break up the set into sections, spread the new material out throughout the set. Don't, as you said, Alan, don't do like a 5-song indulgent part right in the middle where people are lost thinking, oh, I don't know this stuff.
Okay. I mean, one thing I'd pick up now from what I think, Alan, you mentioned, or actually you've all kind of mentioned it in some way or another, which is when you're going to these gigs and they're doing the promotional tour for the new album that's just come out and they're playing stuff. And one of the biggest problems is people aren't familiar with the new album. They've not had a chance to get the album. But I guess now in these day and ages, with the fact of streaming, the album's there, it's on the stream. You've got access to it straight away. You're not having to wait for the to get the CD or buy the CD. You just go onto your streaming platform, Spotify, the album's there, bam, off you go, start listening to it. So that's one of the reasons bands will probably start throwing more tracks in, because they know that if you're a fan of the band, you're going to the concert, you're more than likely will have gone on to Spotify and listened to that album before you've gone. But I know back in the day, I would have gone and seen bands that I hadn't had a chance to buy the album because I'd have to wait to get the money to go to this R Price or HMV or one of those places. R Price, you've got to remember that place.
Woolworths, mate. That's where it's at. Woolworths.
Yeah.
Woolworths, yes, and buy the albums, which you can't do it.
I mean, pick and mix. Yeah,
I love that pick and mix.
I remember buying a Placebo album from Woolworths.
Was that a mistake or?
Yeah.
No, I've still got it in my collection. No, it's a good album. Without You, I'm Nothing.
What Pantera, you got a Placebo. Okay, yeah, good thoughts on that one. Right, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, as always, just reminding people who we have with us today. We have Alan from Before the Sirens and Dave from Lowdown. This is one that I found quite interesting. It shouldn't be a very long topic, I don't think, but it might be an interesting one. Tribute bands.
No.
Should tribute bands of bands that are still together be allowed? This is something, because whenever it's like I've been looking at like live music venues, and you go there and you see, okay, an originals music night, and then there's tribute band, and it's like Wrong Jovi, and then there's a Police covers band.
Oasis.
I mean, I get bands like things like AC/DC and stuff like that, which are not really gigging or anything anymore. So when a band has not gigged anymore, you've got no opportunity to go see them. But versions of Metallica going out as tribute acts, and because we've got one coming up anyway, haven't we? We've got Motor Headache. Now, yes, you can't. There's no chance to see Motorhead, so it makes sense. You've got a tribute. The only chance you're ever going to get to see that, and you can see them at Club 85 with support from Lowdown. But yeah, Motor Headache is an example of something I'd see. But has any of you guys gone and seen tribute bands?
Yeah. So I used to go and see them quite often, actually. Mainly, and I totally agree with what you're saying. It was because there was no way of seeing said band that they were paying tribute to, like Queen, AC/DC. There was an absolutely awesome covers band that I actually tribute band that I actually put on in a pub that I used to work in when I lived in Southeast London, and they were called it was Black Ice, which were the AC/DC tribute band, really good. And then the best one that I've ever seen was called the ZZ Tops, and they had the beards. They had the glow up mic stands, and this is going back like 15 years, like quite a way back. I do think that there is a place for it. I really, really, really do, because they're good fun. Yeah. Provided they don't take themselves too seriously. They are not the band that they are paying tribute to. Yeah. I played on the same set as a Guns N' Roses tribute act. Let's just say that they were late, just like Axl is. It was just really unnecessary. There's loads of them out there, but it was just a little bit cringe. It wasn't needed to go that far into the tribute thing. Don't take it seriously. Enjoy the music. Do it for the main reason why you started it. Remember why you started. Yeah. To enjoy the music and have fun. But yeah, I do think there's a place for it.
I think I prefer tribute bands to covers bands.
Agreed.
At least they're doing the work of like trying to put on the show of the band that they're trying to imitate. Whereas a covers band is just no, I just can't deal with them. Just awful.
Yeah.
But I suppose the argument is with covers bands is most people started playing covers before they started doing originals, but you never really. I mean, I learned to play playing covers, but never actually in a live environment, just to learn to play. I think it's where. Is it because they just don't want to start writing originals, or is it because of the money? Because you get paid pretty good money for doing covers gigs.
Yeah, being a function band.
Functions band. Alan, you got any thoughts on this?
Very little, if I'm honest. No, if I'm being honest, and then this is completely off the hoof because I had so little to think about it in the first place. I've never taken myself intentionally, at least, to see a covers, tribute, or otherwise band. I think that the problem with it is obvious, isn't it? You, as Dave mentioned earlier, you are not that band. Whatever that band was, if they're good enough to have a tribute, they had something really rather special that you're not going to recreate with four mates that you met in the pub and went, should we pretend to be Bon Jovi? It's just not. It's not going to happen. So, I mean, they will always be about. There will always be an appetite for it. You'll have super fans of certain groups, certain eras. You know, you get bands that have, sort of like done that sort of throwback to a period in their lives that they're really into, 80s, 90s, whatever it is. Where I think it's interesting, and this is probably the only time that I've really kind of got into a band that weren't playing originals music on stage, is if you take songs that were popular and do something different with it. Ant's going to love me for this, but like the Real McCoys do, because they take songs that everybody knows, doesn't matter whether you love them, hate them, or otherwise, and they turn them into sort of punk rock, pop rock, well, metal soon to be, songs. And having I was a little bit sort of skeptical for them, bless their hearts, at Bullstock last year, because they played the metal stage and they had a mosh pit to Enrique Iglesias's Hero. I love that. That's quality. That's something different. That's entertainment value. You've worked on that. That's cool. But as I say, in general, tribute bands aren't the band they're trying to pretend to be. Covers bands, yeah, okay, you're basically a walking jukebox.
Okay, Kirk, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, some of them are phenomenally successful. Dave mentioned it. There's more than one Queen tribute, but there is one that tour the world, and that Australian Pink Floyd. Jesus, they do this full time. You know, how difficult is it to make a living in music now? And you've got the Australian Pink Floyd. I guarantee you they could do a UK tour and you'll be at work and people who you thought didn't even like music, like, where are you going this evening? Oh, I'm going to watch the Australian Pink Floyd. You're thinking, you like fucking Coldplay. Why are you going to watch that? And so to me, I was just surprised that you could get to that level. And keyword here, entertainment. I'm with Dave Runham on this. If I'm in a pub and there's live music on, to be honest, it doesn't even matter what it is. There's a liberating feeling of being in a pub in an environment where there's live music being played, whether it's covers, whether it's a punk rock band, an indie band, whatever. You know, so most of the time I can get behind it anyway, because it's just a good way to relax with a few pints. But yeah, it's to be honest, it's Andy might back me up here. I don't even know if I have an opinion on this about whether it's good or bad. Okay. Do what you want. You're still satisfying an artistic urge, aren't you? Even if you're in a tribute band or a covers band, you still need to have talent to learn those songs, and respect to you for doing that.
Andy, you got any closing thoughts on this one?
I haven't got a huge experience of these. I've seen a couple of Iron Maiden ones and a couple of AC/DC ones. I think that's probably about it. I think they're entertaining. I wouldn't go out of my way to see them now because there's so much really good original bands playing in our local venues that I'm not going to go out of my way to sort of see a tribute band anymore. the ones that have been at Club 85, I've been to because I've enjoyed the support band as well. You know, I think with COVID hitting, all the Sky were due to support High on Maiden. I don't think it happened because of COVID, but I'd been up to see that one definitely. I think there's a place for them because I'm not going to go and see Iron Maiden anytime soon. But if there's a covers band, if High on Maiden or Iron Maiden were to play locally with a good support band, I'd definitely be there. So I think there's a place for them still. But there is so much really good original bands in every genre playing locally that deserve your hard-earned buck to go and see, you know, over perhaps tribute band.
But that's probably where my head went with the tribute cover bands, is when you look at a bill for like Club 85 at the moment, you've got the Metal to the Masses things going on. And then if you look at their future dates, it's all just tribute bands that are coming in to play AC/DC tributes and all sorts of Ron Jovi and all that sort of stuff's going through there. And you're like, but if with the limited amount of money that people have to go out and you're going, oh, well, we know what Ron Jovi is going to probably sound like, we'll go to that. And you miss out on the chance to see more original bands. And we're seeing that. I do see it. I mean, they've got drum and bass nights coming up and there's all sorts of other stuff, but the live scene for or attendances of people for the original music at the moment isn't just not where it needs to be. And I think our tribute bands a hindrance to that, or is it good that there is an opportunity for people to play in tribute band? I really don't know. I don't have an answer for it, but it does feel like we're stealing away audiences, tribute bands, so that original bands are not getting the opportunity to play. I'd rather have 5 nights of original music than one night shoved in there with a metal night and then tribute nights all the other nights of the week.
I think we need to lighten up a bit on this. It's not on my conscience if I choose to watch a tribute band over the local metalcore band.
It should be.
Playing the second show. Come on. There are more important things to worry about. Oh, hang on, the money that I've paid on the door, this could have gone in the pockets of a local band and helped pay for their studio time.
Exactly.
Right.
These things with that high level of rational decision making.
We've got a real example of this, haven't we? Do you remember? Well, it's a couple of venues actually, but certainly Hertford Corn Exchange. The Wednesday night metal shows that we've been to and covered as a channel. No promotion venue, no posters, but the Monday night covers band, the Tuesday night covers band, the Thursday night covers band, the Friday night tribute band, and the Saturday night tribute band.
Posters everybody.
All around the venue. Little flyers on the bar. All
Yeah.
the gigs listed apart from one we was at, which had 4 amazing local bands. You know, that's obviously where I think the money is.
And unfortunately, tribute bands do bring the money in because that's where people want to spend it. But yeah, I do. Yeah, that was a good example of what we've kind of seen. So, okay, there we go. That's our thoughts on tribute bands. A couple of more topics to do this evening. So let's move on to our second to last topic. As always, I just got to introduce the guys. We've got Dave from Lowdown and, of course, Alan from Before the Sirens. This should be an interesting one. So one of the things we've noticed on certain albums, and especially when metal albums get released, is bands seem to like to do dance remixes of metal songs on their albums. I noticed this a lot in the mid-2000s. So I've seen it with bands like Disturbed, one of my favorite bands, Demon Hunter, have got a load of tracks and great metal band, and then suddenly you'll get 4 or 5 different remix dance versions of the same song. What do we think about it, especially when it's the band that have done it? It's not a case of some random person's done a weird mashup remix. Bands releasing dance remixes of their own songs, metal songs. But like them, don't like them.
I can't say that I know a lot about them, in all honesty with you. Like, I wonder if it's down to people like having a gateway drug, you know, trying to get people from another sort of like genre into this, you know, because they've heard that. Like, I know it's not the same, but it will come back round when I'm finished. Ghost, their song "Mary on a Cross." Now that blew up on Snapchat, TikTok, and then they re-released the song slowed down with more reverb, which was the trend at the time of people getting a song, slowing it down and adding loads of reverb and like doing, I don't know, I'm not on the TikToks and Snapchats of like all of these making a weird face and looking sad. So Ghost were very, very good at being ahead of their time by doing that kind of stuff. Maybe that's what they were trying to do then. Do a dance remix.
Yeah.
And trying to get people that were listening to, you know, Ministry of Sound, Pure Silk, trying to get them in by saying, oh, well, here's a remix. It's a bit heavier than what you're listening to, but it's in the same vein. So I wonder if it's down to that.
Okay. Alan, any thoughts on this?
It's kind of convoluted, if I'm honest. I think I'm kind of with Dave in that you used the phrase gateway drug. So in dance, particularly with, you know, some of the sort of dance genres, some sort of subgenres of drum and bass and things like that, there is a kind of similarity in terms of pace and certainly some aggression. But I think really that, if in my opinion at least, it was certainly brought more to the fore by Pendulum, because they were essentially a rock dance band. They were a rock drum and bass band. If you've ever seen Pendulum live, they actually play live. They play guitars, bass, drum kits, the whole lot. And that was kind of epitomized when they brought out, I don't believe it might have been a Mercer actually. They brought out their album and they had a song on there featuring In Flames, and it was called The Self versus the Self. And that was about as close as, it wasn't a remix, don't get me wrong, but it was about as close to a metal drum and bass track you've ever heard, because it was the In Flames guitarist doing the guitar parts and then this kind of drum and bass thing underneath, and they had the vocalist over the top, the In Flames vocalist. And as I say, I think the fact that certainly the Hold Your Colour album from Pendulum was kind of, there were rock, like I got into it because there were sort of rock roots to it. You could hear it. There was kind of rocky sort of metal attitude about it in certain parts, particularly with like slam and things like that. And so I think that's probably where the appetite for dance remixes came from, because you can take that aggression through into a different genre very quickly simply by taking the stems, putting a dance drum beat underneath with a few synthesizers, and you make the same song with the same sort of attitude sound completely different. Would I do it? We looked at it once. Somebody asked us if we wanted to have a look at doing a dance remix for one of our songs, Control, ages ago. Never really came out in the end. It didn't come out, in fact, but I liked it, but it was a different vibe. It was a bit more mellow than we were doing. But if you can maintain the sort of ethos of that kind of you know, the aggressive metal that you're trying to encapsulate in the dance remix, then fine. That said, sorry, I promise. I said I didn't really have much to say, and then I've just carried on waffling on.
You like me?
If anybody has heard the Blacklist album, and I mentioned this because it came on in my car yesterday on the way home from work, there are a couple of covers of Wherever I May Roam on there. One, namely by Chasing Status, and it's possibly the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life, because it's some rapper whose name I don't know singing over a slowed down version of Wherever I May Roam. I say singing, he's rapping, but he's rapping the same lyrics that James Hetfield did. So he's quite literally going like, it's just atrocious.
How do you rap and the road becomes my bride as the intro?
Like this, and the world becomes my bride, innit? That's, I'm genuinely impersonating what I heard. And it was like, you know, the whole Roma, vagabond, call me what you will. It was like, it was literally just word for word recited it. And I get where people are coming from. Metallica have influenced like millions of people over the years, you know, but for God's sake, don't give it to a rapper and say, yeah, go on then, because no. But that, yes, dance remixes can work, but most are a bit cringy and a bit rubbish.
Okay. Andy, you got any thoughts?
I didn't really know this was a thing, and it's what bands are doing. So it's an interesting discussion point. My input on this is probably 20 years ago, if not longer, Earache released a sort of dance album of some of their top rostered bands, songs, and Napalm Death was on them, and it was generally awful. I think I did like the Napalm Death one. I can't even remember what song it was. It might have been Breed to Breed, something like that. And then a Swiss dance techno band done some Morbid Angel remixes, and again they seem to work, but it's not your Ibiza chill out dance remixes. It's the extreme end, like I think Gabba was the term, or really hard dance, hardcore versions of these particular songs. So it can work. It depends on the source material. It depends on what they're trying to do, what spin they put on the actual track. But as a rule, I'd probably say no, avoid it. It's not something I'd be looking at to listen to. And I don't think it's something that should be encouraged by the bands themselves. But if a sort of dance or record producer wants to sort of try and put a different spin on a record, then he should be allowed to. But I don't think bands should be actively seeking to do it and sort of push it on their fans.
Okay. Kirk, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, so what was the original question?
Good or bad? Doing these dance remixes, do we think they're a good thing or a bad thing, or you have no opinion one way or the other?
No, I do. The reason I ask is I don't think this is a trend, although I don't think you were implying that. Do you remember late 90s, early 2000s in the music industry, where the only way you could get music was buying the physical product, and you had the top 40 singles chart? And in the UK, we took singles a lot more seriously than in America, where it was all about album sales. So the major labels that signed up a lot of these heavy rock bands in the wake of grunge and then nu metal, they'd be surprised by how quickly they'd be able to shift a platinum album, and they'd be like, let's get some singles out. Let's not just do one CD version. Let's do CD 1 and CD 2, and we'll just fill them all with dance remixes that the band have not even heard. So sometimes the artist wasn't even aware of this. However, I guarantee you there is no way that Kurt Cobain of Nirvana would ever allowed one of his songs to be remixed on CD 2 of a single by Geffen Records. Soundgarden wouldn't do it. Pearl Jam wouldn't do it. Correct me in the chat if that has actually happened with Pearl Jam. The nu metal bands certainly were. You'd buy a Korn single, CD 1, CD 2, 3 remixes. You've never heard of these people who are remixing them because you don't listen to that type of music, and they were utter shite all the time. There is an exception though. Faith No More, album of the year, 1998. I remember buying it. I've got the special version with CD 2, and it has got some really cutting edge drum and bass remixes, and they've really preserved Mike Patton's voice. So there are some exceptions, but to me, this was a music industry con, just to try and bleed as much money as possible out of an album cycle. You don't have that now. Nobody releases physical CD singles. I don't think even Adele or Taylor Swift would release a CD single, would they? Certainly albums and vinyl. So this was a trend that was really perpetuated by a dollar-hungry music industry. Understandable, that's their job. And I just don't think the bands even had any complaints in this. They didn't have a choice often. Some of those record contracts were awful. And you look at it, there's bands who are getting millions of streams on Spotify, but because they signed a shit record contract in the 90s, even though you think on paper that they had a double platinum album, they hardly saw any of that money. And they're still paying back the recuperables in their contract now on Spotify streams that have got 50 million songs, and they're still not making any money out of it. So the trend, it was a trend, wasn't it? Because of the music industry and the rush to try and make as much money as possible, which is their job. I don't really see it much now, Dave, but I don't know enough about the TikTok trends, the micro trends that are happening there. So I can't really give an opinion on that. But hey, if you're an artist, experiment with anything you want. I'm the only one here who's not an active musician. So you four, really, would you want someone to say, oh, you're a metal band, these are the rules, you can't do this? I don't think you'd be happy with that, would you?
I mean, I think one of the things I would say around these dance remixes and stuff like that is I've seen it more on album reissues. So whenever they reissue an album or they remaster an album, whenever, and I don't know if that's the band or I don't know if it's the record labels. I see that quite often. And whenever they do a reissue or something like that, there's always the bonus tracks, and most of the time they're remixes of earlier tracks on the album in a dance form or something extra like that, or they've been done in a different way. So that there is still that trend of trying to take in effectively the album that you put out 2 years ago, work on some bonus tracks and stuff, and then reissue it with the idea that hopefully you're going to sell it again. And I still think there's still an element of that going on, because I'm still seeing it with some albums that come out recently. But okay, interesting topic. We have one last topic for this evening. Okay, so before we start that last topic, we're going to, of course, introduce our visitors today. So we have, of course, Dave from Lowdown, and, of course, Alan from Before the Sirens.
Alan.
Okay, here we do it. This is a difficult challenging topic because it can put some people's noses out. But each of us, who is your current favourite band in the Hertfordshire metal scene and why? And you are not allowed to pick your own band, guys.
I don't know anybody that would do that. That's like proper cringe.
It's like, yeah, I'm awesome. Right, I'm going to throw it to you, Alan. I think the two guests have got.
Why did I open my mouth? I knew you'd ask me first.
Who do you really like to go and see? That's probably the best thing.
Okay. I will caveat this by a very short sentence. I hope it's a sentence, might be two. And that is that when you go to see up and coming bands, which is a phrase I hate, but still, like original bands that are just starting out, might have been around for a few years, but the likelihood is, unless you've seen them many, many times, you don't really know a huge amount about their back catalogue. You may know one or two songs because you've checked them out before you went to see them, or you're playing with them, or whatever else. But the real what I'm looking for when I see a sort of a band at this sort of level that we're discussing is to feel something. Is for them to bring something to the table that maybe you haven't seen before, or maybe it's just simply how tight they are, how aggressive they are, how like the way the vocal melodies are arranged or whatever. So I didn't ask you a question. My watch has just told me the answer to what I was just saying. Look, I said I don't know anybody who would talk about their own band. I wouldn't, obviously, because I said how cringy it was. But genuinely, I love going out to see Lowdown. They're like, right. I'm not just saying that because he's here. I genuinely am not just saying that because he's here, because I've told him that. He knows it. They've got their own brand of things that they do compared to other bands that I see, certainly locally. And Dave's got a great voice. They're, shut up, Dave. They're technically, you're going to sit here and listen to me now, no matter how much you blush. But they're technically fantastic as well, and they write great songs. So, like I say, they've got that kind of groove. That's the feeling I'm talking about. That groove of Dave's voice over the top really, I really kind of feel inclined to be sort of glued to them on stage, and they have a presence about them. I remember the first time I saw Sentient, you mentioned them earlier in the video before Dave and I came on. They are just crushing, and JB's got that voice and he's got a presence. He's a big man, and he really fills that stage, and you find that's quite a hard. It's quite hard to look away, frankly, because they're so they've got a sort of magnetism about them. I'm giving you a list now because I don't want to just give you one, because you've asked me who is my favorite. Well, I'm not going to tell you one. But I'll be honest. Like, look, you mentioned earlier in the video before Dave and I came on how strong the quarterfinals are for Metal to the Masses. I would say that there is a really strong offering and a really strong scene, like in that sense at the minute. The list of names, you talked about most of them earlier, frankly, but the list of names of bands that I would stand and watch because they are good at what they do in varying different subgenres, genres itself, or whatever, is is quite a long old list. But you know, yeah, as I say, I really enjoyed Dave's band, and I must admit the band I've seen recently that stood out for me was Sentient.
Okay. How about you, Dave, then?
So I moved up to Hertfordshire from southeast London about a year and a half ago. And I knew very little about the Hertfordshire metal scene. I'd played Club 85 quite a few times on tours, but I'd never really known a lot. So I've been pushing myself to go out to almost every Metal to the Masses gig, just to show support, in all honesty, to actually go out. And if I want to be part of the scene, I need to be part of the scene. So for me to do that, I've been going out to see a lot of bands. And I've got to say, there are, like Alan said, there are several that stand out to me. I think that my favorite, because of the songwriting that I enjoy, vocally, what I enjoy, aggression, what I enjoy, and it's going to come across really weird now because of what's been said, is Before the Sirens.
you love. Oh,
it's a bromance.
What you haven't realised is Dave and I are in the next room to one another, and there's going to be a big cuddle in a minute.
He's got a really long arm, and it's just down here.
Remember.
So weirdly enough, like because I've met up with Alan quite a few times, outside of obviously doing the gigs and that, and and I do gel with Alan directly, and I do think that matters when you go and see a live band, and then you meet the person, and I've done it so many times that they're completely different. What the fuck is that? Just, why are you acting? Be genuine, be you, and you will have people that will like you for what you do. But I really enjoy their sound. I really enjoy the vocals that Alan puts out, and I think it's because we have a very similar taste in regards to how we grew up and what songs and what bands we listened to. Another couple of like honorable mentions are I think Millstone was someone that really surprised me. I was told about them by a few people that I tattoo, and they sort of said, "I'll go and watch them," and they happened to be playing a heat that I was going to, and yeah, the dude's voice, just very impressive, very impressive. I enjoyed their look. Just everything that's kind of going on. Another honorable mention, Nomadic Rain. I think that they're doing something which I've never seen before. A female-fronted doomy band. Again, maybe it's because I haven't seen that many doom bands, but I really quite enjoy it. And again, Sentient, just a fucking machine. Yeah, I really enjoy them. So I'll be going to see them again.
Okay, let's throw it over to Kirk.
So we're talking about Hertfordshire. So there are some legendary bands in this county that are signed. Countless Skies. Wow, what a band they are. I really don't listen to much melodic death metal, but I think they've really re-energized that scene, and it was good to see them play that metal festival in Slovenia and do a European tour, and they're touring with that Danish black gaze band, Mole, aren't they? They've raised money online for that. They are a spectacular band, really gifted, great songwriters, really complex as well, but it's just so listenable. It's prog metal with death metal in there as well, and cellos, and really epic. Ross King, what a vocalist. Another band that are signed, who I absolutely love, they're signed to that avant-garde label, Trepanation Records, Everest Queen. Their last album, Andy, you'll probably back me up on this, is a classic. Murmurations. It made the Scream Blast Repeat top 50 albums of 2022, and they've really taken sludge and post-metal in a new direction. They're even incorporating Cocteau Twins, an artist like that in there, and the main songwriter, Adam C. Taylor, who actually is a guitar teacher as well. Very tasteful with his playing, but I've seen some of the chords that he's fretting, and is it me, when you watch them live as well, what a vocal, the might that he's got in his vocals, really impressive again. So they're the two that stand out, that are signed, that have gone on to the next level. The band that most excites me is Burdensome on record. They've never really achieved that live sound, have they? The mix, they really need to sort it out because Declan, fantastic vocalist, Owen on guitar, they remind me of one of my all-time favorite bands, Death, the band that invented death metal, Chuck Schuldiner. They've got a lot of that in their music. Carcass is in there as well, even Opeth and Gojira. So they really excite me. And then finally, the band that really got me into the scene, Jackal's Backbone. Probably, she's got to be one of the best vocalists in the country. I'm not just talking about the scene, and not just because she's female. Listen to Jackal's Backbone on record. The enunciation of Becca's vocals, really harsh, but you can hear every word that she's delivering. And they have an interesting mix of sludge, punk rock, and primitive death metal. So that always excites me. So yeah, they're the ones that stand out for me. Burdensome as a band that have, like the others are relatively new. That's the one that I look out for. I'm really excited by them.
Okay, Andy.
This is such a tough question. I know why it's come the end of the session, Dave, but we have got, as everyone has said, we have got an amazing scene here in Hertfordshire. I don't know if this is replicated around the country. It's certainly not the case in sort of Cambridgeshire. I mean, there's some really good bands in Cambridgeshire, but there's not the depth and breadth of bands, in that particular city as we've got in sort of Hitchin, Hertfordshire, Hitchin, Stevenage, this area here. This is really difficult for me because I've been following the bands in this scene for about 6 years, and we as I said, there's some that have passed and gone, and some that are still sort of playing and gigging from when I first started watching bands. The ones that I've seen certainly sort of mature and grow are bands like Elysian Divide, and Sentient, of course, as has been mentioned. But this is really difficult for me because I am friends with a lot of people. But if I'll go back to what you said, Kurt, Count the Skies, I get goosebumps when I watch this band live. I get goosebumps when I play their album after I've just seen them, thinking I've just seen them perform this song, and it resonates with me still. From takes you back to that experience of the night before or 2 nights before when you've seen them perform it live. They are fantastic, and I'm looking forward to hearing their reworked versions of some of their classic songs with the added cello and string parts. Another band I'd add to the list, of course, that I would have done if the gig had gone ahead and would sort of travel a little bit further out to go and see, because I haven't seen them enough, and I think they are phenomenal and have grown as a band, and is Own Your Life. We talked about them earlier in the session. The great new EP.
Oh, the Cambridgeshire based. That's why I didn't choose them.
Oh yes, that's a good point.
Yeah,
they've been struck out of the technicality, but they performed at our Metal to Masses Heat. So they're growing as a band. I'm looking forward to their new material. Their current EP is fantastic. I love their live shows as well, and you two guys here as well. Love what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
Alun in particular, I've seen Before the Sirens for 3 or 4 years, and I'm drawn more and more to your material, your performances as a band, you as a frontman. As I say, we're blessed with bands in this scene. It's so hard, and it's difficult for me with the current, sort of what's the word, sort of financial position we all find ourselves in. I used to go to every single gig. People used to say to me, "Oh, why didn't you go last night?" They expect me to go to all these shows. I would normally go to all these shows, every single show at Club 85, at the Red Lion. But, money dictates you can't go to everything now, which is a real shame because we've got a great scene. And that's pretty much my summary of it. I love our local scene. I love the bands we play here. We're truly blessed.
Yeah, well, it gives it down to me then to wrap up today's live stream with my thoughts on my favourite band of the Hertfordshire scene. And it is tough. You've all said it is really tough. And I'm going to give you my 4 runners-up that I also really enjoy going to watch, just, before I get to my final. So, Lowdown, you're in there. Absolutely love what you do. I love
you. We could have done a top 5, Dave. We all could have done a top 5. That made it a bit easier.
Well, you all did top 5 yourselves. You all gave me at least 7 or 8 bloody bands. So Lowdown's in there. Scarlet Envy, of course. Love what these guys do. Millstone. And mate, the thing for me with Millstone is it's because I've seen them last year when they did like their first proper live show, and how they've improved in the last 12 months, especially with James with his vocals, has got stronger and stronger and stronger. Kadama, absolutely love Kadama. Absolutely just so professional as a band. And really the one band that I will always try and see if ever I can is Before the Sirens. And there's two main reasons for it. It's because I love the weight of the guitars, the breakdowns. Alan's got a great voice. You have.
Thanks,
it's very distinct. It's very unique. You've got power without having to go aggressive and growl. I'm not a big fan of growly vocals. I'm not a big fan of that kind of going full on screaming, and yet you get weight with a clean vocal style, which I really enjoy. And every other band that I've mentioned, we've talked about this when we talked about reactions. Sometimes you have to feel that you need to be in the mood to do it. So when we talked about reacting to bands, and we're like, do you know what? I'm just not feeling in the mood to take it on tonight. And we've had to go through like a reactions night when we're not really vibing. But with Before the Sirens, if I'm feeling a bit down, you've got your music makes me feel a bit better. If I feel full of energy, I can get onto it. It doesn't matter what mood I'm in. I can still enjoy Before the Sirens performance. So that's why you're my favorite band to check out. So there you go.
Thanks, man.
There you go. Oh, we've all been stroking Alan's ego today.
Oh, I don't know what to do now. I can't take compliments.
Andy, I just need to check technicality. No member of Musk Hill is currently based in Hertfordshire, are they?
Again, just throw another one in the mix. Yeah.
The reason I'm sure they're all from Bedfordshire, and Daryl, I think, even lives in Buckinghamshire. I can't think of any member that's from Hertfordshire, because they would be my number one, actually. So it's Countless Skies, but Dan definitely is from Luton way, Dunstable, I think.
I think it's just been so hard to actually pick out bands, because just narrowing it down, there is so many. I didn't even mention, like, for the heavier bands, Dead Flesh. I actually really enjoy those guys.
I was thinking of that. Yeah, Pretoria.
There's just so many bands you could pick from, but a good.
Dave. One more, which I meant to do. When they were actively touring and sort of recording new material, I would say this is going back probably 2, 3, 4 years. Skull Fuck from Stevenage.
Yeah.
Okay.
They've now they've really turned their attention to grindcore and power violence, haven't they, in the heavier hardcore scene, those members. Yeah, they were cool.
They're when I heard their debut album, I thought, well, this sounds like a established, mature band who are creating some fantastic death metal with a bit of humor as well in some of the songs and the lyrics and everything. And then you find out they're like early 20, even teenagers from Stevenage. You know, you're kind of shocked. So they were the band that I really was looking forward to seeing, sort of 2-3 years ago. And I'm not quite sure what the state of the band is at the moment, but I'd like to see them sort of back on the scene, bringing out new material.
Okay. There we go. Well, that is our time up for this evening on our live stream. So it leaves me to just say a big thank you to Dave from Lowdown, and of course Alan from Before the Sirens for taking out some time this evening to chat with us. Thank you to everyone that left comments. We've had lots from Ant. Who else? We've got James left loads, Charlie, and a whole load of others on here. The guys from A Stranger. Just a big thank you to you, Richard Ems. Thank you for you. And if I've not said thank you anyway. I do appreciate it. We always do. So please make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on some other videos in sometime in the future. Take care, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.